Hello and welcome back to the wrap-up video for Chapter 3 on Network Security for CMIS468. We left off last. We were getting ready to talk about cryptography, and this is a very detailed topic that we're not going to get into in depth in 468, but at the same time I would encourage you to do some fooling around on your own with cryptography. If you're into this kind of mathy stuff, definitely check out cryptool.org /en for English. Cryptool.org is a good learning tool for learning more about cryptography, and I went to a workshop at Carbondale 2 summers back to learn a little more about it. But when it comes to cryptography, CIA is the big acronym. Sometimes CIA is used to refer to security in general, but for cryptography in particular, the point of cryptography is to ensure confidentiality that can't be eavesdropped off, I for integrity, to make sure that the recipient receives it unaltered. The key word there is unaltered. And finally, authentication to identify the identity of the sender means you're authenticated. So CIA is an acronym you'll see over and over in the security world. Yeah, symmetric key encryption is one type, asymmetric is the other type. In this version, the message is encrypted from party A to party B. Really, I like the video that we did in class in terms of explaining the difference between public and private keys. But if the video is confusing with their weird color metaphor, feel free to go back and double check the book on some of this. I can't remember if this edition of the text says this, but I think it's important to know AES. You don't have to remember Advanced Encryption System, but AES is the most popular symmetric key encryption cipher right now. So symmetric means there's just one key that's used to encrypt and decrypt both ways. Asymmetric uses a public and private key, both. And we use both. It's not that one is better than the other. It depends on the application that you're going to use, symmetric versus asymmetric. The only cryptographic system we're going to talk about in this chapter is actually just the simple SSL/TLS. So just by the acronym TLS, Transport Layer Security, you know immediately what layer we're talking about, which would be layer 4. Yes, correct. Very good. We're not going to discuss IPsec, which is another, it's the gold standard for encryption. We're going to do that in a later chapter. In this chapter, I do want you to be able to just recognize the HTTPS. Whenever you see that, the S is for secure. It means you are encrypting using SSL TLS. TLS is the new term, but everybody still calls it the old secure socket layer SSL term just because we're lazy. This is probably the easiest form of security to implement because it's kind of built into every browser and web server, and all. It's just a matter of turning it on. The downside to SSLs, the only thing that encrypts are web pages, only HTTP traffic. So, and email if you're using a browser interface for your email. So it can't protect all traffic. If you're doing, if you're streaming something, if you're doing a file transfer, if you're doing any other kind of traffic, it can't encrypt that. So, yeah, SSL is one way to do a host-to-host VPN. But the key here is you're just talking to from a browser to a web server. I don't like this picture because it makes it look like a more secure VPN that's encrypting all traffic. And in fact, when I was at a conference recently and asking about what's the direction of VPN technology, and there's Citrix was one of the vendors there, and they said the big trend is micro VPN. So just as background for you, micro VPNs don't encrypt all traffic. It just encrypts at the top application layer by application. So you'd have a micro VPN encrypting all of your Word traffic, all of your Excel traffic, all of your email traffic, just for every individual application. All your database traffic is probably a better example. Micro VPNs are starting to be big. But I definitely need you to understand why Homework 2 failed with the instructions that I gave you. The erroneous well, it wasn't erroneous, it worked last year, but then Wikipedia decided to start encrypting their web page by default. So that's why you couldn't get find the get command for the text string because it was encrypted. And then when it had you go to a different web page, you could find it because it was not encrypted. It was just passing it plain text. So plain text is kind of the devil when it comes to network security. You really want as little as possible passing via plain text over your network. IPsec, it used to be, we talked about in this chapter. I'm going to skip this since we get into IPsec and other mobile VPN technologies in a later chapter. But this is a good time to point out the trend in network security. I had said in class several times that enterprises tend to have a dedicated firewall, a dedicated intrusion detection system, a dedicated router, a dedicated everything box. There is a trend to take all these tasks and glom them together into one big box. Personally, I don't like it, just because I don't like to put all my eggs in one basket. But if you know, I'm a slave to Gartner, anything Gartner says, and they say in the UTM, by the way, stands for Unified Threat Management. So the direction that a lot of companies, including the St. Louis area, are taking is towards unified threat management. So one box that takes care of everything, all the layers, top to bottom. Well, next to bottom. Well, yeah, top to bottom. So they say, well, that guards the physical layer because you can physically lock up the server with a lock and key. Okay, fine. So it's all the layers. If you look at this, here I can move me out of the way here. Fortinet is a company that's in the upper right-hand quadrant, which means they're an industry leader right now. If you look at this screenshot from one of their advertisements, they're saying, they take care of all the layers, but they're doing, firewall, VPN, intrusion protection, and detection and prevention, antivirus, spam, web filtering, application control, advanced threat protection. Probably kind of digging into opening up each packet to see exactly what type of traffic it is. Is this allowable SharePoint traffic, for example, going to this specific user? So it's certainly getting more and more sophisticated. This is one trend. I'd rather have a separate box for doing each one of these myself, but your company may differ. We don't need to get into this discussion. I always like to kick this around in class in terms of how to respond to a DDoS attack. My answer is I'm chicken. I just work with my ISP. Because in a way, there's not a lot you can do other than work with your ISP to get them to turn it off, to block it on their end. But that's probably a simplistic answer for now. Pwn plugs. I really want to talk about pwn plugs. We need to talk about that in class. Yeah, we'll talk about that in class. Security podcasts are another way to kind of stay sharp, I would say. SANS has a lot of good stuff online around security. There are all kinds of web pages. GRC is a good site for security, and he also has a nice security podcast. I love 2600, the magazine. It's old hacker magazine, 2600. And hackthisSite.org is a good one for kind of testing your own hacking skills safely, in a legal, ethical, white hat sort of way. Kali Linux is a Linux distribution dedicated to intrusion testing, penetration testing, hacking, depending on how you use it. I don't even know why I'm giving you all these links. Geez. I'll expect you to share some juicy links with me too, for those of you that fool around with this stuff on your own time. But to wrap up this chapter, the stuff that I really want you comfortable with for the exam, and just going forward as an IT professional, there's a trade-off between security and productivity. It's a basic trade-off. So if IT could choose, we'd have 10-factor authentication, but that would sacrifice productivity. Users would have us turn off security so that they can immediately access every application they want to. Well, every business has a different trade-off between these two extremes. Banks may be more security conscious than maybe a nonprofit organization, although that's probably a bad example. Different companies find a different trade-off. Role-based access, the idea that you should have the minimum amount of access that you need to do your job. Role-based as opposed to user-based access, which is the stupid way to do it. Okay, just individually assigning rights in Active Directory to my user account, TFJax, in the domain. Don't do it that way. If I need sysadmin access, drop me into the group that says system administrators can get to the following servers. That way, yeah, you just put me in and out of a group, and don't copy my access onto somebody else. It's always group based. Protecting all the layers. Again, layers are so important to coming up with a comprehensive security plan. Changing your password frequently sounds stupid, but this is the best thing you can do. Proactively to change your password often, even if you're not forced to change your password, and get your users to practice good password hygiene. You have to teach them. Don't mock them. Just teach them why it's important. This is my personal pet peeve. I really don't like people that talk about IT security as being IT's problem. It's a business problem. There are lots of reasons for this, and don't get me started on a rant, but it's the business side that's going to have to pay the fees and penalties and go to jail if there's a data breach, if you lose a lot of personal healthcare information. It's not IT that's going to jail, it's the business leader. So it's a business problem. Anytime you lose money or lose customers, that's a business problem. That's not an IT problem. So I hope you are working on studying for the exam at this point on the first 3 chapters. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all about content on the exam. I mean, I can't tell you specific content, but it's completely fair to ask me, hey, on page 100, do we need to know these numbers? You can ask. Sometimes I'll say, yes, it's very important. Sometimes I'll say, no, you don't need to know that for the test. And sometimes I'll be coy and say, maybe, but you can always ask me. So good luck, and if I can do anything to help you out ever, please let me know. Thanks.